This is the moment you've all been waiting for.
We are back at it with another episode of Talkin MMA, episode number 9. We got a lot to cover. It was UFC 272, a very action-packed, busy weekend in the world of MMA. We also got some big fights coming up next weekend. That's the beauty of the sport. That's why we love it. We're always looking back, but we're looking ahead as well. I want to start off the show with the announcement right off the top. I'm going to be making all my fight picks from now on Verdict. So go download the Verdict app, and there you can hold me accountable for all my picks. I will have the upcoming picks on there. I will have the past picks on there. And this all starts for the stupendous main card picks. This starts with Verdict at UFC 273. We're going to be tracking it from there on out. As for UFC 272 in regards to picks, it was a good night. 5 for 5 on the picks. You can go check that out in the last video. Check that out on my Twitter. So it was good. If you stuck with us, you made some money. If you had the courage of your conviction to maybe trust in some of the picks that I was breaking down, then you won some money. So good for you. If you did not, I would encourage you to do so in the future, and you could check that out again through the Verdict app. UFC 272. It was a good card. From start to finish, I think everything delivered. You know, even the prelims delivered. I enjoyed the card. It was fun as hell to watch. So let's start right at the bottom of the card. We got Sergey Spivak versus Greg Hardy. This is one that's kind of a lot to unfold, because here's the deal with this, right? So Sergey Spivak beats Greg Hardy. That's now loss number 3 in a row for Greg Hardy, if I'm not mistaken. Now, this is a guy who, listen, I'm not the biggest fan. You know, we know his background. We know his background of domestic violence. We know that, you know, he used to be an NFL player. He got into some trouble. And, you know, things didn't go his way. And now he's in the UFC, you know, and a lot of people don't like him, you know, obviously given the fact that his backstory and some of the mistakes he's done. And, you know, he's been on record saying that he's learned from these mistakes. You talk to some of the people that know him well, like some of his coaches, like Dean Thomas, will say he's a new guy. You know, he's really learned from it. He's regret his past. My issue is not that. Listen, my issue really isn't that with Greg Hardy, right? It's not, do I condone it? Absolutely not. Like, I'm already not a huge fan of the guy just because of that, if I'm being quite honest with you. And I think a lot of people would agree with me on that. You know, I've seen a lot of stuff, certainly on Twitter from this past weekend when Hardy lost, a lot of people bashing him. A lot of people feel very strongly about this guy. And I think rightfully so. My issue that is a stronger sort of frustration with Greg Hardy, the greatest frustration I have with Greg Hardy is not that. Is not, oh, this guy, the mere fact this guy has made those mistakes in the past. My issue is the chances he's getting, the spots he's getting, and they're not deserved. Like, why is Dana White doing this? Is he giving him like the CM Punk treatment where, you know, the skill level's not, and don't get me wrong, it's not a great comparison because Greg Hardy's not CM Punk. But I'm saying CM Punk was a big name. A lot of people knew CM Punk from the wrestling world. You know, a lot of people knew Greg Hardy from the NFL world, right, from the football world. So did Dana White take advantage of that name to put him on a bigger platform? Because we saw CM Punk on a main card that he had no business being on. We've seen Greg Hardy in many spots, you know, whether it's fight nights or pay-per-views, on many high spots that a lot of people would say he doesn't deserve, and I would agree with those people. That's my bigger issue with him, is how is he getting these fights with Alexander Volkov? How is he getting I believe he has a main event or 2 fight, if I'm not mistaken. Has he not fought a main event before? On like a fight night before? The guy's gotten certain spots where it doesn't make any sense, where fighters that are far better than him, far more skilled than him, have been in the game far longer than him, have put in far more work than him in the world of mixed martial arts. He's getting fights where guys like that are not getting. So that doesn't make sense to me. That's what's unfair to me. It's not, I do already have a problem because of the background. You know, if you want to say, you know, he's a new guy, he's changed, whatever, fine. I have my own feelings about it. You know, someone who, you know, would really put their hands on a woman, to me, it's something that I just don't condone. But again, that's not my main issue. My main issue here is the fact that this guy's getting all these spots and he doesn't fucking deserve it. It makes no sense. Why is he on the main card of a pay-per-view when you have the prelims are pretty stacked here? And there was at least 3 fights in the prelims that I would have put over the Greg Hardy fight. Easily Jalen Turner versus Jamie Mullarkey. That fight should have been over the Greg Hardy fight, that should have been on the main card easily. Marina Rodriguez versus Jan. Was that not a great fight? That fight easily could have been on the main card over the Greg Hardy fight. Made no sense. And even Marina Moroz versus Agapova. You could even have made the case that that fight should have been on there. Two women that are more skilled at their craft, in their division, in their gender of the sport than Greg Hardy is at his. So why the hell is Greg Hardy on the main card? It doesn't make any sense. Other than going back to the CM Punk reference, it's because of star value. Is it because of that? Because it makes no other sense as to why these matchmakers would be putting Greg Hardy on all these main cards. This guy's had good spots before. This guy's been on main cards, many main cards before. Like, has he ever even, how many times has Greg Hardy actually fought on a prelim? A couple times? Most times, from what I can remember, he's on main cards of fight nights, pay-per-views. He's on big spots. He's in big spots. So I don't know. I just don't get it. You know, the guy has a background, and if that's what you want to primarily shit on him for, go at it. Because I don't condone people who beat women. It just upsets me. But my bigger issue for the last time is how the fuck is he getting all these spots? Even if he never did what he did, strip away all the past issues, right? Strip them all away. He has a clean record. This is who he is in mixed martial arts. He's the same guy, but just strip away all the outside shit, right? He still doesn't deserve anything he's gotten. Nothing. What is he now, like 7-6, 7-5? He should get cut from the UFC. He is not a UFC caliber fighter. He's a very one-dimensional fighter. He's shown it time and time again. And then you get a guy in Sergey Spivak who's a well-rounded who's just a mixed martial artist. Don't even say well-rounded. He's just a mixed martial artist. So he can do it all. You know, he can get you in the grappling. He can get you in the stand-up, and that's what he did. He finished Hardy, knocked him out in the first round. Did he knock him out cold? It was like a TKO, but still finished him with punches. And that's the problem with Hardy. He's a very one-dimensional fighter. So he would have had trouble down the line regardless, you know? Very one-dimensional fighter. Especially now in this new age where people are starting to get into mixed martial arts overall now. You have the opportunity to get into a sport and not be one-dimensional now because you come into the sport fresh like Greg Hardy where you don't necessarily have a background of boxing, wrestling. It's a good opportunity to come in and be a well-rounded mixed martial artist. Just learn everything at a steady pace altogether. But, you know, he chose to try to be a striker and a knockout artist because he's a powerful, athletic, strong guy. And it worked for him, you know, well in the beginning when you have these contender series fights where you're facing guys that aren't at the highest level. But when you get to that next level, even if they're unranked guys, it's still the UFC. You're gonna have trouble. So, again, you know, I can't say I'm surprised, and I would cut him, honestly. I don't understand why this guy's still in the UFC. There's something about his demeanor that's always bothered me too. He's always had kind of like that smart ass attitude, whether it be in press conferences, interviews, whatever it is. I remember like even when the whole inhaler shit happened in the post fight interview, he was so nonchalant about it, like he didn't make a mistake, like he knows he didn't mess up. Like I don't know, just a lot of things about this guy just rubbed me the wrong way. Then you had that whole, I don't even want to get into it. Just not a fan of the guy, and I'd say 55 to 60% of it is just because he's had so many spots and he's undeserving of. And obviously, you know, that other 40, 35%, we know what it is. Kevin Holland versus Alex Oliveira. So, again, this was a good matchup for Kevin Holland. It was a smart decision by the UFC. You know, you were giving him some pretty bad matchups, whether it was Derek Brunson, whether you were giving him some good wrestlers in the middleweight division that were tough for him. You know, was the move to welterweight as important as you finally gave him a good fucking matchup? You finally gave somebody with star potential a good matchup? I'd say it's about a 50-50 thing, you know? Early on, we saw that he was like, oh, okay, you know, like this is welterweight. You know, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to adjust when you get to a new weight class. We saw a little bit of a struggle early on in that fight. But once he got acclimated into the fight, everything seemed okay. He was pretty screwed at the end of round one there, right, with the rear naked that Alex Oliveira had caught Kevin Holland in. But then we had that funny moment where he puts a thumbs up, right, as the clock runs out because he knows he's good. And then obviously he goes on to finish him, KOs him in round two, and that was all she wrote. So it was a good welterweight debut for Kevin Holland, a guy who's very, very talented. But again, it was a good matchup, and this might just be his weight class, right? Because you could say maybe he was a little small for 85, but I attribute just as much I give just as much credit to the fact that it was just they finally gave him good matchmaking. They finally gave him a guy who he should have been in there with, you know? And, you know, he called out, obviously, Cowboy Cerrone a little bit, hinted at it after the fight in his post-fight interview. That's a fun fight. You know, that's another fight. You just build him up. That's what you should do. Brock Lesnar was on the Pat McAfee show in an interview the other day, and he brought up a good point about Dana White. He said that sometimes Dana White doesn't do a good job of building up his stars, giving them the right matchups, and it's true. Because sometimes Dana White does things like say, a Sage Northcutt, where he's giving guys terrible matchups. They're doing it right. They do it right in some scenarios, like Sean O'Malley, for example. But Kevin Holland, I think they did mess it up somewhere along the way. But, you know, he's a welterweight now. If they could make it right here, you know. I'm not saying pad the guy's record. It's a UFC. But I'm saying, you know, the guy's still young. He's still developing. He's still learning in the sport, right? Obviously, he's already, you know, made waves in the sport, but, you know, I think it's something that if you want to get some star power, if you want to really get the squeeze out of this juice or out of this fruit, whatever fucking scenario you want to say, it's better to give him a couple matchups just to get his confidence back. You know, I'm not saying give him softball matchups, give him good matches, but, like, you know, give him some strikers, give him something that he can handle. Give him guys that can compete with him, but that he could also compete with them. Not mismatches, you know? He's a fun guy to watch. Fun guy to promote. So for the next fight, we got Bryce Mitchell and Edson Barboza, right? You know, that was a very one-sided, unanimous decision through 3 rounds. It was a statement fight. You know, 145 pounds is now on notice. You know, Bryce Mitchell is the real deal. Once he gets a hold of you, that guy in the grappling is an animal. He's like a snake once he gets a hold of you. What he did to Barboza in that fight was shades of Khabib. You know, for the most part, you see a bloodied up Edson Barboza who just looks like a deer in headlights against a guy who's just on top of him, wrestling him the whole fight. You know, it was a scary sight for Edson Barboza. You know, was it a place Barboza wished he'd be? Obviously not. You know, I'm sure after the Khabib fight, he said he never wanted, he had said to himself he never wanted to have a fight like that again in his life. This was pretty damn similar. You know, 145 pounds, again, you've been put on notice because there's a new contender. Bryce Mitchell is the real deal. You know, we know what he could do when this fight goes to the ground. You know, we know what he could do when he gets a hold of you. But look at what and look, again, it's like the Colby Covington syndrome in the sense that, you know, the wrestling opens up the striking, right? But be it what it is, it is what it is, though. Bryce Mitchell dropped Edson Barboza with a shot in round 1, so we know he has power to drop people. You know, we're talking about a guy who's very, very dangerous in terms of, like, the submission threat. Very dangerous once he gets a hold of you. Very good in terms of just leverage of weight and the trips and takedowns. He's a very good grappler. That's his MO, right? But he looked like he can hold his own in the striking. Looked like he has very good kicks as well, or pretty good kicks. When you look at the 145-pound division, it's pretty wide open in the sense that, so we got 1A and 1B, Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, right? Whatever order you want to put that in. I think Max is the best one. We have Korean Zombie who's about to fight Alexander Volkanovski, right? So I think Volkanovski will win that fight fairly easily. I'm actually not even too interested in that fight, if we're being honest. That was supposed to be Max versus Alexander Volkanovski originally, if I'm not mistaken, right? Max had to pull out. Again, we'll see that fight down the line, the trilogy. That'll determine who the best guy is, and that'll kind of throw the other guy out of the picture, right? Because they've lost the trilogy, like you would think, right? So when you look at everyone else at 45, Brian Ortega lost 2 times. He's not going to fight for the title for at least a few fights. It's going to take him a while to get back there. He might even have to consider a move up or something. Yair Rodriguez, he's a guy who's, you know, he's had a couple setbacks. He just lost to Max. Now, did he get blown out? No, but it was pretty decisive that Max won the fight. Pretty decisive that Max is better than him, you know? He's going to have to face a couple more guys. Korean Zombie, I think, is about to lose, again, to Volkanovski. Calvin Kattar just got mauled by Holloway about a year ago. Now, I'm a big fan of Calvin Kattar. Did bounce back against Giga Shikadze, but he's got to prove himself in a couple more fights to get back into that real title contention where he's going to fight for a title next. Josh Emmett, I think, is a dark horse of this division. Arnold Allen's a guy who has that opening because he's going to fight Dan Hooker this weekend in a fight at 45. That could open up the doors for him to get a title shot or a number 1 contender fight at 45. So right now, I think the most dangerous guys, you're looking at Arnold Allen, and then you're looking at Bryce Mitchell, who's now number 9, jumped up 2 spots. You know, a fight against Giga Shikaza would be fun. A fight against Josh Emmett would be fun. A fight against Calvin Kattar would be so fun. You know, there's good opportunities for him, and if he can win one of those fights against a guy from, like, let's say from the 4 to 8 range, right? Then you're looking at a guy who is probably going to be in a number one contender fight after that. So this was a big fight for Mitchell. You know, it was a bigger fight for Mitchell than it was for Barboza, given the setbacks that Barboza's had. Mitchell's on a roll right now, so you know he's kind of undeniable right now. If he keeps winning, he's a fight or two away from a title shot. I'd say 2. So, but again, what a mauling. What a statement. Rafael dos Anjos versus Renato Moicano. You want to talk about another mauling. This was a very one-sided fight. We saw that RDA. Now, here's the thing. I did pick RDA to win this fight, but I thought it was going to be a very good fight. Hell, I thought it was going to be a fight of the night contender. Now, maybe going into round 5, if we had like a 6th and 7th round, hypothetically, maybe it was looking like it could have gotten there, but which is shocking to me. RDA, for the most part, manhandled him, right? He was pretty much winning the striking exchanges. He was using the wrestling almost at will, the takedowns almost at will against Moicano. RDA just looked levels ahead of this kid, you know? But the controversy, where it got interesting, I'd say, gets to obviously the 4th round, where RDA almost finishes Moicano. Moicano is hurt bad. I mean bad. Like, this guy's like a zombie at this point. You know, he's a dead man walking at this point. And RDA is not able to finish the fight. And it's one of those situations where you think the fight's about to be finished. Looks like it's about to be finished. Looks like it's about to be finished. Looks like it's about to be finished. But it's not finished, right? He doesn't end up getting that actual last punch to seal the deal, to officially put his lights out. So Mark Goddard did a good job officiating this fight. And he did an excellent job. Like, he proved to be the gold standard of MMA reffing in this fight. Just a prime example of how good he is. The way he just controlled the fight and took it over. Like, the fight was in his hands, and, you know, he did what was best for the safety of the fighters. So, again, RDA doesn't finish it. He can't get that last blow in, so Mark Goddard doesn't step in. We go into round 5, and we have the doctor check out Renato Moicano. Renato Moicano's face is a mess at this point, man. Like, I don't know if it's his left or his right eye, but it's swollen shut completely. It looks like he can't see through it. Apparently, the doctor said he could see through it. Now, was that Renato just being a tough guy and just saying, yeah, I can, even when he couldn't? Maybe. I'd say there's a very good chance of that. But somehow, I thought it was going to be stopped for sure. You know, Joe Rogan thought it was going to be stopped on commentary. I believe Bisping did as well. And it wasn't stopped. Mark Goddard goes up to him, and Mark Goddard's worried. So he says, listen, if you don't show me anything for over the next 30 seconds, I'm stopping the fight, which is a great job. Again, took the fight into his own hands, did what was best for the safety of the fighters. But the thing is, he didn't stop the fight. But Renato Moicano also didn't give him a reason to, because Renato Moicano won the 5th fucking round, which is shocking. Like, this guy was a fucking zombie. Now, some people have said that, Rafael dos Anjos gassed out. Others have said that Rafael dos Anjos took it easy, like, oh, thank you, RDA, for taking it easy on Renato Moicano. Again, some think he gassed. I don't know. I'd say it was a bit of both. I'd say he was definitely feeling a little bit tired. It was a 5-round fight, so he was definitely feeling the conditions of a 5-round fucking fight. He was obviously putting it on him, right, in round 4. He was trying to finish the fight. That's going to take a lot out of your gas tank because he didn't end up finishing the fight. So that was obviously an issue, right? But Renato Moicano just showed what a dog he is, what heart he has. And I think his stock did go up in a lot of people's eyes in this fight. You know, his stock did not go down. You know, he proved his worth in this fight. He proved that he's a guy he's a tough guy. He's not going to go away. Again, I think he actually won the fifth round. For reasons why RDA lost that 5th round, I don't know. But it was a strange fight. My issue with the fight is, I do think it should have been stopped in round 4. It should have been stopped. I don't think it should have gone into the 5th round just because of this. Look, I'm not denying or debating that Renato Moicano did well in the 5th round, did well after that. Again, I just said he won the 5th round. You know, I'm not denying that he could have been there, that he was going to be there to the end of the fight. Obviously, he was. But the job of a referee, the job of a doctor is to protect the fighter from himself. These are the toughest guys in the world, MMA fighters. They're the toughest athletes in the world. Like this almost isn't even a sport. You know what I mean? This is the fight game. These guys, you have to protect them from themselves. Again, that's why there's refs. That's why there's doctors. Renato Moicano would have kept, if you would have thrown another 5 rounds, another 25 minutes on the clock, Renato Moicano would have kept fighting. Renato Moicano would have kept fighting to the death. But that's not the point. That's not the point that he did well. That's not the point that he would have kept fighting to the death. Point is that you might have taken a few fights off this man's career. Like the brain damage this guy took in that fight. You know, these guys are fighting in 4-ounce gloves. So it's tough to see because you don't want these guys to be taking these damage. You know, Renato Moicano is still a guy who's fairly young. He's a guy who's very talented. I don't think it was worth taking that damage, man. Live to fight another day. You were losing 4 rounds to 0. I mean, were you going to go out there and finish him? Fuck, you almost did, so maybe I'm wrong. But I just don't agree with it. I don't know. For long term, maybe for the short term, I mean, yeah. But for the long term, like, why? Why keep fighting? They need to throw the towel more in MMA. It's something that it doesn't get done a lot. It needs to be done more, you know? So for the main event, we got Colby Covington versus Jorge Mazvidal. This was obviously a one-sided affair. It was best friends turned bitter rivals, grudge match, right? We knew that. We knew that the backstory of this fight was good. Now, here's the deal. I thought this was going to be a better fight than it was, than a lot of people were going to give it credit for. It was pretty one-sided. It was a fairly one-sided affair. I mean, it wasn't that one-sided, given that the UFC thought it was fight of the night and gave him fight of the night. But, I mean, it looks to be a fairly one-sided affair, right? If you look at the total strikes, it was 218 to 90 in favor of Colby Covington. Significant strikes were 94 to 67 in favor of Colby Covington. The takedowns were 6 to 0 in favor of Colby Covington, who's landing at 40% clip out of 15 takedowns. So, yeah, Colby definitely won the fight, obviously, going away. I thought it was going to be a better fight than people were giving it credit for. But again, Masvidal had his moments. You know, Masvidal, put Colby down in round 4, put him down, dropped him to one knee. Not put him down, but he dropped him to one knee. He definitely hurt Covington with that shot. Definitely wobbled him. If you look at the still image of that shot, he cracked him real bad on the jaw. But Colby won 4 rounds to 1. That's what I had. I actually had Covington even winning that round, that Masvidal put him down to one knee. The round that I gave to Masvidal was a round where I went back and saw the fight, of course. It was around where the ESPN Plus thing went down, and a lot of people had issues with that. Did go down for me as well, but I didn't miss 3 minutes of the fight. I heard a lot of people saying they missed like 2, 3, 4 minutes of the whole round. I only missed like a minute and a half. I was able to get it right back up, or maybe even a minute. So I pretty much was able to see from what I saw from like the 3.5, 4 minutes of that round that Masvidal won. And another thing was, if I'm not mistaken, there was a long stoppage in that round because of the crotch shot that Covington hit Masvidal with. So, that helped. So I did have Masvidal winning that round. Masvidal did outland him in the total strikes and significant strikes in that round, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go back and check that. Round 2. So what is this, the wrestling? There we go. There we go. Round 2, Masvidal. Masvidal did outland him, yeah. Masvidal landed Covington in round 2. So I gave it to Masvidal. I did think he landed the more power shots. Masvidal was able to stuff a lot of Colby's takedowns in round 2, a few of them. Was able to push off and then, break off and make it a stand-up exchange. That's probably, round 2 was how Masvidal probably envisioned the entire fight going, given that he was so confident he was going to win. But, yeah, round 3, Covington won. Round 1, Covington won, did a lot of what he does. Round 4, Covington won, did a lot of what he does. Round 5, Covington won, did a lot of what he does. But again, round 4 was a little tricky because Colby did get hurt a little bit. But I had it 4-1 for Colby. Now, one thing that I did say going into the fight, and I'd say did pretty much play out exactly right, was something that wasn't that difficult to see. You know, Colby Covington, when he feels that he has the advantage in the wrestling, which is against fucking 95% of the guys he fights, he's gonna go for the takedown. He's gonna mix it up. That's what he does. He's gonna throw a few punches. He's gonna go for the takedown. Punch, 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 takedown. Kick, punch, takedown. Punch, punch, kick, takedown. He's gonna mix it up. That's what he did against Tyron Woodley. That's what he did against Robbie Lawler. That's what he did against Rafael dos Anjos. He followed the exact same blueprint that he did against the Masvidal fight. Because Masvidal, similar to those guys, you know, they probably had the advantage against him in the kickboxing, but he knew that, you know, when the fight got to the ground, he was going to do what he did. What was interesting is I thought Masvidal was going to have more resistance because Masvidal throughout the history of his career is very offensive on his back. But the problem is Masvidal wasn't really on his back a lot, flattened out on his back per se, so he really didn't give him the chance to throw a lot of those elbows that he likes to throw from his back. Colby had him against the cage a lot of times. A lot of times Colby likes to throw these punches, get to your back, and go for the choke. But he almost like teases it. He never actually finishes people with the choke. And then he just gets back. Then he just gets back in front of you, maybe throw some punches, still on top of you, then gets to your back again and attempts a choke. He does it to a lot of people. He did it to Robbie Lawler against the cage almost the exact same way that he did against Masvidal in that fight. Like, I implore you to go back and watch the two fights. There's a lot of similarities in those two fights. And again, he fought that similar game plan. In the Usman fight, he didn't do that or in the first one at least. In the second one he did, he was a little bit more wrestling, and he was able to briefly take him down for like 0.1 seconds, if you count that as a takedown. But in the Usman fight, for the most part, he stood with him because he felt like he maybe had the striking advantage, you know, or maybe not that he feel like he didn't have the striking advantage, but he felt like he didn't have the total overwhelming dominant advantage in the wrestling. Now, here's what's interesting is Colby a better wrestler than Usman? Now, I'm not saying is Colby a way better wrestler than Usman, but is Colby just a better pure wrestler than Kamaru Usman? Now, we know that the credentials would slightly lean in the direction of a Colby Covington, right? He was a D1 wrestler. Kamaru was D2. Now, that, again, doesn't really mean much. And again, wrestling MMA is so much different from like just the sport of MMA in college and all that. But if you look at Covington in comparison to Usman, Covington was able to keep Masvidal down a lot easier than Usman was. Usman had a lot of trouble keeping Masvidal down. And Usman has even credited Masvidal in interviews and things that leading up to this fight, saying that Masvidal, he was a tough guy to keep down. Like, I was impressed with his takedown defense. I was impressed with his offense from the back, you know, from his back. I didn't see a lot of that in this fight against Covington. And Covington also, again, was able to take Usman down in their fight briefly, right? No one's ever taken Usman down. So it kind of it's a good debate, but it makes you wonder, like, is Covington a better wrestler than Usman? He might be a better wrestler than Usman. And Colby, we know his gas tank is the real deal. Colby Covington might have the best gas tank in all of MMA, you know? If he doesn't have it, he's definitely up there. Max Holloway, we know, has got a good gas tank. Other guys are also known for their gas tanks, but Colby Covington, with the pressure and the pace, he's a dangerous fighter. Like, what are we going to do about Colby? The guy's a real fucking problem. You know, if we look at Covington, I mean, what's next for him, right? Because when you look at the rankings at welterweight, all roads to Kamaru Usman are going to have to go through this guy, because he is clearly, like, at 145 pounds, he is clearly the second best guy in the division. Clearly. Like, if Kamaru Usman was not alive, like Dana White said many times, Colby Covington would be the welterweight champion of the world. And I don't even think that's fucking debatable, honestly. The problem is Colby lost to Usman twice. It's a tricky situation. Like, I don't think in the history of the UFC, there's never been a fighter who's been granted a trilogy after losing the first two fights against someone. It just doesn't happen because it really doesn't make sense. But, you know, special circumstances call for special occasions. So, this is a very special circumstance. Just like the Davis and Figueroa versus Brandon Moreno fight. It's a special circumstance to maybe want to make a fourth fight, even though it's never happened. Again, in this one, Covington's down 2-0, but it's a very special circumstance to maybe want to consider a third fight. I mean, Colby won rounds on Usman. You could debate Colby won 5-6 rounds against Kamaru Usman. Very debatable. So it's going to be interesting to see what's next against Colby. Dana White almost confirmed at the press conference right after UFC 272 that that Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev was going to be a number one contender fight. And I think he's saying it now, especially because if you look at the landscape of the middleweight division, like who else really, you know? It has to be. It makes sense. Leon's going to fight Kamaru in the summer. That seems like it's almost a done deal. You know, Luque and Bilal may need another fight after that. And even if they don't, they're still going to have to fight, which their fight hasn't come up yet, fight and then recover and all that deal. So, you know, Wonder Boy obviously no. Masvidal dropped to 7 in the rankings. Interesting. Sean Brady, you know, not there yet, Sean Brady. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be Khamzat or Gilbert Burns. Whoever wins that fight is going to have to be next, you know? And then, you know, Masvidal, still a big star, so I think there's still a lot of stuff you could do with him. So it's going to be interesting to see what's next for both guys, man. Colby Covington, again, he's definitely not fighting for a title next. He called out Dustin Poirier, right, in the post-fight interview. So, you know, maybe a fight with Dustin makes sense, and then maybe after that you take on the winner of Gilbert Burns versus Khamzat Chimaev if they want to end up doing that instead. And then that determines a true number one contender. And who knows, man, maybe Kamaru Usman retires before Covington even gets to get back to him. You know what I mean? Kamaru Usman's done a lot in the sport. He's on a crazy win streak. You think he's going to stick around for 5, 6 more fights? There's a little interesting little snippet that I saw that Kamaru Usman was doing some media in the build-up, because, again, they did use him a lot in the build-up to this fight, which I thought was genius because he did fight these guys twice himself. So he knows more than this. He knows more about this fight than arguably anybody. It was funny because he brought his daughter to do like a little media press thing. And his daughter said, they asked like, how many fights do you think your dad's going to have or whatever? And his daughter said 5. And she was adorable, by the way. But she said 5. And Kamaru looked at her like, 5 fights? Like, he looked like shocked, like almost like, I ain't fighting 5 fights. You know what I mean? So I thought that was really interesting. And, you know, something that maybe a lot of people didn't get to see. But Usman's not going to stick around that long. It's like Khabib. Like, we thought he was just going to continue to dominate the sport forever. But he had already done a lot leading up to this point. Usman, don't be shocked if he retires. So again, where does that lead me to? Covington may not even have to Covington may not even have to fight Usman again. It may not have to go through Usman for him to get another title shot. Maybe one day we see Khamzat Chimaev versus Colby Covington for the undisputed title. You know, for the vacant undisputed welterweight title. All right, so we got UFC Vegas 50 this Saturday. And I got to say, compared to like the last couple fight nights, especially like the Hill Walker one, this is a hell of a card from top to bottom. Now, is this no, it's not. Okay, because I know that the UFC is going to start taking it on the road again, the fight night. So I'm super excited with that. They're going to have the live audiences again, which should make them just way more exciting. I was kind of getting used to the whole Apex thing. I know this one's going to be in the Apex. It's going to be March 12th, 7 o'clock p.m. The main card starts, which is pretty favorable for some people on the East Coast. That way you don't have to watch the main event at like 11:30, 12 like you usually have to. But I got to say, man, this is a loaded fucking card for a fight night. Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva to start off the main card, right? Alex Pereira, a guy who, if he can keep picking up momentum, the only guy to have beaten Israel Adesanya in his kickboxing career, when Izzy was at the top of the kickboxing world, obviously before transitioning to mixed martial arts, this guy Alex Pereira flatlined Israel Adesanya, and I believe he beat him twice in their kickboxing matches. So if Alex Pereira can keep moving up the ranks, I believe he's undefeated in the UFC right now. If he can move up those ranks and get to the title shot, it would make it for a very interesting storyline as well as like fight against Israel Adesanya. It'd be a really good sell. Like you got a lot of stuff you could sell there for that fight. And that's just to kick off the card. Then we got Drew Dober versus Terence Mckinney. What a fight that is, man. Drew Dober, before he fought Islam Makhachev, let's not forget about how people were talking about Drew Dober. Like, still think he's a real deal. But again, that's what happens when everyone fights Islam. It almost feels like every time Islam Makhachev fights someone, like, throw away everything that person's done in the past. They're garbage. That's what it seems like. Drew Dober versus Terence McKinney. Terence McKinney, a guy who says he's going to be a UFC champion one day. Obviously a very exciting fighter. A guy who's obviously been in the news a lot lately. You know, again, just exciting. So, Drew Dober versus Terence McKinney. That's the second fight on the card. Then we got Khalil Roundtree versus Carl Robertson. So that's going to be a good fight. Khalil Roundtree is always a very exciting fighter to watch. So, you know, it's going to be good to see him get back in there. Then we got, for the co-main event of that card, we got no, it's not even the co-main event yet. So the next fight, we got a featherweight bout. It's Sadiq Yusuf versus Alex Cassares. Number 12 versus number 15. That is a hell of a fight, man. So moving on up the card, we got Marlon Moraes versus Song Yadong. And Marlon Moraes, a guy who's had a rough go, man. If you look at the last 4 fights, he lost against Aldo. Well, he didn't lose. He won the fight technically on paper, but a lot of people thought he lost that fight. Jose Aldo pretty much got a title shot right after that. It says a lot about that fight. After that, he got finished by Sandhagen. He also got finished by Rob Font, and then he got finished his last fight. So it was a guy who's 3 knockouts and losses in a row. I would say 4 losses overall in a row, technically 3 on paper. So Marlon Moraes is a guy who's got to get back on track. Remember how scary he was, like when he was rising through the ranks of the bantamweight division? Remember how scary he was against Henry Cejudo, especially in that first round? It's been quite the fall from grace for him. He's going to take on Song Yadong, who's number 14. Marlon's number 10 now. If Marlon loses that fight, he might fall out of the rankings, He might fall out of the rankings at bantamweight. If things don't go his way, I feel like he should have done this anyway, but Marlon Moraes should go up to 145 pounds. He's so big for the weight class. Like, why do that to your body? Just, I don't know. Maybe he wants to get in there with the smaller guys, take advantage of that, but I don't see it, man. Just go up to featherweight. I feel like he'd be better there. I don't know. I feel like his gas tank would be a lot better there. We've certainly seen issues with his gas tank. We've certainly seen issues with his chin in recent fights. That weight cut might be getting to him. Then we got the main event, which is Thiago Santos versus Magamet Ankalaev. Look, man, I've been on record about Magamet Ankalaev. He's a bad motherfucker. Like, there's nothing else to be said. He's one of the scariest guys in the UFC right now. And the problem with Ankalaev is, wherever the fight needs to go for him to win is where it's going to go. Now, here's my issue with Thiago Santos. Thiago Santos is a very good fighter, but we haven't seen it in recent fights. In the Johnny Walker fight, he looked good, but looked a bit tentative to me. In the Glover Teixeira fight, did not look good at all. There's certain fights in his last two, three fights where it didn't look like the Thiago Santos that stepped in there and went toe-to-toe with Jon Jones. Because Thiago Santos against Jon Jones was a guy who apparently with one leg went to a split decision with Jon Jones. Some people had him winning the fight. I didn't, but Jon certainly had more questionable split decisions than that one. But again, that Thiago Santos, I have yet to see him since the Jon Jones fight, really. So I don't know what's been happening with him. We know it's a guy who has scary, scary power, like big time power. Maybe the hardest hitting guy in the division. But again, is he going to be able to deal with Magamet Ankalaev? Even in the stand-up, is he going to be able to deal with Magamet Ankalaev? Because, Magamet is so good, man. I don't think anybody wants to see him in this division. Like, I think he's among the one or two best guys in the division. I think it's only a matter of time before he holds the belt in that division or before he's at least fighting for it. Whether it's him, Yuri, or Glover Teixeira, I think those are the 3 best guys in that division. And I think this fight's going to prove it. He's number 6 and he's fighting number 5 guy in the world in Thiago Santos. It'll give him a good chance to crack into the top 5. Might even get him a title shot after this, considering he's fresh blood, right? Because you still got guys like Anthony Smith ahead of him. Guys that have fought for the title already. So, but the problem with this guy is, if, let's say, Thiago Santos starts landing some shots, which he's very well could, and maybe Magamet Ankalaev feels that he's in danger, he's at a threat, Magamet Ankalaev is going to have no issue taking this fight to the ground and smashing him. Like, he's one of the more well-rounded fighters in the entire UFC. Scary, scary guy. But the thing is, he might just knock Thiago Santos out in the stand-up. Like, go check out his last few fights. The guy is a fucking problem in the stand-up. Go look at his fight against Volkan Oezdemir, and that's a very telling thing. This guy dominated Volkan Oezdemir from horn to horn, from round 1 to round 3. Just dominated him all the way through. Volkan Oezdemir is a very good measuring stick at 205 to sort of figure out where you are in the division. Are you a legit guy? And Magamet Ankalaev had no issues with Volkan Oezdemir. Just did whatever he wanted with him. A beast, man. Just a beast. Again, super dangerous, not only in the wrestling, which is obvious, but in the striking. Power in his hands. Knockout power. Absolute knockout power. The guy's got dangerous kicks to the body, dangerous kicks to the head. You have to watch out, man. He's a very dangerous fighter. He throws that left kick out of the southpaw stance, and it's super fucking dangerous. So, again, this guy's scary, man. Who's going to want to face him? He's a minus 450 favorite. Thiago Santos at a plus 340. Man, Magamet Ankalaev is going to be a big problem. If we pull up the rankings at 205, Who doesn't he beat it, with the exception of a couple guys that you could debate? Because you could even debate he beats those guys too, you know? Look who's ahead of him. Anthony Smith, Alexander Rakic, Yuri Prohaska, Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira. Well, yeah, we got Alexander Rakic in there too. So, again, man, look, Anthony Smith, I think he beats Anthony Smith. Jan Blachowicz, I think he beats Jan Blachowicz. Those are two guys already ranked ahead of him in the top 5. Thiago Santos, I think he's going to beat him, you know? And he may make it look fairly easily. If the Thiago Santos that from the Glover Teixeira fight shows up and Magamet and Goliath decides that he wants to take this fight to the ground and, you know, win it on his terms easier, that's what he'll do. So, again, I don't know who's going to want to face this guy. This guy is absolutely one of the scariest guys in the entire UFC right now. So that's UFC Vegas 50. It's going to be a very good card. Again, it starts at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN+. Let's get into this week's top 5. So for this week's top 5, I don't have anything like set, like, oh, best strikers, best this, best that. This week's top 5, I'm just going to guess the top 5 highest paid UFC fighters right now. A lot of times I do these lists, and I think the fun of it is sort of just doing it right off the jump. You know, I'm not preparing for this in advance or anything. So again, for number 5, I'm just going to guess Nate Diaz. Every time he comes to fight, that's usually when you start to get the mix of the hardcore and the casual fans coming together to watch Diaz. You know, he's had his fights with McGregor that sold a lot of pay-per-views. He's had his fights with Masvidal that sold a lot of pay-per-views. If you look at Diaz's last fight, which we could pull up here, the salary. So Nate Diaz's purse against Leon Edwards was just the fight purse alone. It says he took home reportedly $250,000 against Leon Edwards. Now that's not bad considering was he even the co-main event on that card? He was just a regular fight on that card, and he's fighting a guy who's not a big pay-per-view draw. And Nate, a guy who was pretty much out of the title picture, pretty much not competitive within the rankings of the UFC. So for him to even be making that money, and we know what he's made in the past. This guy's made 7-figure paydays before, whether it be against Jorge Mazvido at MSG, whether it be against Conor McGregor. You know, we've seen him do it before. Nate Diaz is a big-time star. There's a reason why people are tuning in to watch Nate Diaz fight, even after he loses a lot. Because let's face it, the guy's lost a lot. What's he got, 14, 15 losses on his resume? But he's always a guy, he's a fan favorite. And Nate Diaz is a guy who, if the UFC had Faraz Zahabi said it best, if the UFC had no time on the clock, and it was just like a fight to the death, Nate Diaz might be undefeated. Nate Diaz might be the baddest guy on the planet. Now, that's irrelevant to the pay, but is it? That's probably why so many people like to watch him fight, because of that, because he's such a dog. Coming in at number 4, I'm going to guess it's Jon Jones. You know, whether he's sold the most pay-per-views ever, because he hasn't, whether he's been the biggest draw ever, because he's not, Jon Jones is still a fairly big star within the company. He's still cracked into the casual fan's eyes, in the sense that, you know, a lot of people think he's the GOAT. You know, a lot of people have heard about the controversies, you know, whether they're good or bad, you know, the outside stuff. That certainly made him more famous, whether he wants it or not. And then he's a guy who's also taken a big percentage of pay-per-views throughout his entire career. So think about that. This guy's been making pay-per-view his entire career, for the simple fact that, like, more than half of this guy's fights have been championship fights, which is just mind-blowing to me. So this guy's been getting, now I don't know what the setup in terms of like the pay-per-view deal and, you know, how the percentages and all that. I don't know how that was for, you know, previously with Fox and Spike and all that stuff, but, you know, Jon, for the most part, he's been champ for as long as I can remember. He's been fighting in only championship fights for as long as I can remember. So Jon's been getting the cut of the pay-per-view for all of his fights. So I would think Jon's in there. I'd probably have him around like the top 4 if I'm guessing. If I'm pulling up his last fight here, it says that he made $540,000 against Dominic Reyes, $500,000 a show, $40,000 fight week incentive. So he made $540,000. So that's not bad. Again, UFC fighters are not getting paid that much. So again, and that's without the percentage of the pay-per-view and all that. So I would think Jon Jones is number 4. Number 3, the guy who just fought. Number 3, the guy who is an interesting scenario in Jorge Masvidal, because he's a guy who just lost. He's a guy who's on a 3-fight losing streak, but he's also a guy who is the 3rd highest paid fighter that was. Now this one I could almost guess it pretty easily because it did come out recently that apparently Jorge Mazvidal is one of the 2-3 highest paid fighters in the UFC. So I figure he's around like the third highest paid fighter. And he's a guy who, look, I mean, whether he wins or loses, he's always going to put on an exciting fight. Whether he wins or loses, he's always going to be a fan favorite. In the last fight against Covington, it says right here that Masvidal should make anywhere from 1.2 to 1.5 million, including his purse and the pay-per-view, because he did get a cut of the pay-per-view from this fight. I don't know if Covington got pay-per-view from this fight, which is interesting. But again, for him to be he's making a 7-figure payday from this fight. So he's easily one of those guys that's more on like a regular basis getting 7-figure paydays, like a McGregor, like almost like an Adesanya. But yeah, you know, he's someone that win or lose, he's still a star, but it's an interesting dilemma that he's in with the UFC right now, because you're wondering, like, the guy's on a 3-fight losing streak. It's almost like at this point he's going to be set up like a Nate Diaz, where you're not really going to take him too serious in terms of title contention, whether he might take it serious, because I know he still wants to get the title. He still wants to fight Colby again. He still wants to fight Usman again. I don't think that's going to happen. But he's a guy that can get paid big money. If you're gonna pay him all that money now that he's on a 3-fight losing streak and he really has no championship aspirations in the future, you know, at least get the best out of it. You know what I mean? Like really get with the most that you can out of Masvidal and put him in fun fights. Put him in fights that are gonna sell pay-per-views, that are gonna make yourself money, that are gonna make him money, and that are gonna make the fans happy. And you still can do that with Masvidal. Even if it doesn't mean a title picture, you could still do that for sure. At number 2, I'm going to go with the guy we just mentioned, Israel Adesanya. Is it any surprise? Israel Adesanya recently just signed one of the biggest deals in the UFC, in the history of the company, apparently. You know, before he fought Robert Whittaker, or was it after? Somewhere around that time. Him, similar to Masvidal, he just, you know, Izzy just signed a new deal. And I don't know if it's true, but apparently there was rumors that deal is going to be paying him over 7 figures per fight, just from the purse alone. And with, you know, that would be with the included, you know, cut of the pay-per-view and all that stuff. So I would think Israel Adesanya is the second most selling pay-per-view star in the company. He's a big star. He definitely deserves it. You know, I'm not saying Masvidal doesn't deserve it, but when you talk about Masvidal in comparison to Adesanya and the money that they're making, Adesanya is good for it in every way. He's going to go for the titles. Adesanya is going to sell fights. He's going to make big fights. He's going to have fun fights. And he's going to talk shit. The guy's good on the mic. He's good at promoting himself. He's good at promoting fights. So this was easy. Israel Adesanya is easily one of the 1 or 2 biggest stars. And I would argue Israel Adesanya soon could be number 1. You know, he could really make that transition into the number 1 guy. He could almost be the next Conor McGregor of the UFC. Now, do I think there's ever going to be another Conor McGregor in the UFC? No. He may not be quite that. But, you know, when Conor transitions out of the sport, this could be the next guy to take that place and be that mainstream guy that could really bring all fans from all platforms to come in and to tune in and watch his fights. So, and it also says that Izzy's last payout was, you know, the $1 million base salary, which again we just spoke about, and the pay-per-view share worth $500,000, in addition to about a $42,000 from Venom. Again, we're not even counting that though. So Izzy from his last fight though walked away with about 1.5 million, over 1.5 million. So the guy definitely has to be one of the 2 or 3 highest fighters, if I'm guessing. Number 1, obviously, it's Conor McGregor. You know, we don't even have to get into this one too much. It's a guy who we've seen from all across his career sell massive pay-per-views, whether it was the Aldo fights, the Diaz fights, the Floyd Mayweather fights, the Khabib fight, which is still the highest selling pay-per-view in UFC history, over 2 million pay-per-view buys, which is fucking insane for a mixed martial arts fight, right? Who would have thought that 10 years ago, 20 years ago? But again, this is the guy that made you think it's possible. This is the pioneer of all this shit. You know, Conor McGregor, will there ever be a bigger star in UFC than Conor McGregor? Honestly, I don't think so. At least not in my lifetime. I don't think there'll ever be a guy that has the aura, the magical feel that Conor has to him. You know what I mean? Again, all the pay-per-views he's sold, even the Alvarez pay-per-view, even on the lower scale where he didn't have the greatest dance partners, the guy was still able to crack 1 million buys, 1.2 million buys. You know, it says a lot about him. You know, if you look at his last fight against Dustin Poirier, which wasn't his highest purse ever, not even close to it, in MMA, of course, because we know he's made like 100 million fighting Floyd. But in MMA, his last fight, his payout was $3.6 million reportedly against Dustin Poirier in the second fight that he lost. So, I mean, the guy's clearly number one. Like, there's obviously a gap between 1 and 2. It's clearly Conor. But again, his base salary alone was 1.5 million. You know, everything else after, cool. But the base salary, but Israel Adesanya's base salary actually isn't that far away. It's about 1 million. Conor's is about 1.5. So it's showing that, you know, the UFC may be willing to pay their fighters if you can show, if you can prove to the UFC that you could sell pay-per-views. Francis Ngannou versus Cyril Gane. How many pay-per-views did that sell? I heard that the numbers didn't do that well. Now, Dana White doesn't want to pay Francis Ngannou, but at the end of the day, the biggest measuring stick of how big you are is how many pay-per-views do you sell, right? That's the end-all, be-all, right? Maybe. Now, look, does Francis deserve it? Of course. Francis' job is not to entertain people. Francis' job is to win fights, and he's beating the best guys in the world, so he deserves to get paid adequately. But I'm just saying, like, you kind of, to play devil's advocate, could sort of see where Dana's coming from. You know what I mean? Why he's been a little bit hesitant to pay Francis, but could pay his former, Nigerian friend Adesanya the money that Francis maybe wants to make. So it's interesting, you know? Let's get into the MMA news of the week. And as always, we're going to MMAfighting.com. Kayla Harrison re-signs with the PFL on a multi-year deal. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. So for the last few months, we've been speculating, debating, wondering where Kayla Harrison's going to go, you know? Not arguably, by far the biggest free agent in MMA. She was. Not anymore, because she's now signed with PFL again. And look, it's someone that I thought the UFC was going to have a big chance of signing. Could the UFC have signed her after Amanda Nunes, if Amanda Nunes had won? Yeah, maybe that fight would have happened. It would have made more sense at the time. But, you know, I think she did the right thing. Just continue to win fights. And if the UFC isn't going to match what the PFL wants to give, if the PFL is going to pay you, then take the money, man. You know, you're a mom too. You also have to provide. So I think, you know, she did the right thing. She signed in the PFL in 2016, so she's been loyal to them for the last 5-6 years. So it's good to see her re-sign. And, you know, maybe one day she'll be back in the UFC. You know, she's obviously an 11-0 undefeated mixed martial artist, one of the most exciting. And the thing about Kayla Harrison, man, is like, I think she could, like, already beat Cyborg. Now, is that a huge step for her? Does she have to win a couple more fights to prove it? Yeah, but I really think she's at that caliber of beating like an Amanda Nunes, a Chris Cyborg, someone like that, like a Juliana Pena. I feel like she'd smash Juliana Pena. Joanna Jędrzejczyk's still passionate about fighting, but admits, I'm making more money outside the octagon. Now, how many fighters have we heard say that before? You know, we've heard people like Paige Van Zandt say that. We've heard people like Sean O'Malley say that. I'm always very busy, Jędrzejczyk says on The Fighter versus the Writer. Like I said before, it was time for myself, time for me as a human, time as a businesswoman and as an athlete. Like I said, I was training really hard. I was super busy, crazy busy, traveling every single day, working every single day, but training is always my priority. I wanted to make sure that everything's going in the right direction, because when my fighting career blew up, I was focusing only on my fighting career, and it was good, but I like to do so many things. I'm personal with so many hobbies, passions, businesses. I wanted to make sure everything was going in the right direction. Now I have a clear head, a strong heart, and I can be focusing only on training. So it's good to see that, she's doing well financially outside the octagon. And I think it's important for fighters to know going into it, like, hey, just because you're in the UFC, just because you're in Bellator or PFL, doesn't mean you're set for life. Like, you're going to have to make smart decisions outside the octagon. UFC 272 medical suspensions. Jorge Mazvidal requires MRI following loss to Colby Covington. That's shocking. I mean, look, say what you want about Colby. The guy is just, he's a bad motherfucker. Like, he's a real deal. He's dominant. He's a good fighter. But to say he's an exciting fighter, no. And there's no knock on the guy. You know, the guy follows the best path to victory. You know, he follows what he does best. He wrestles you to death. But he's not going out there knocking people out. He's not going out there dropping people or putting on crazy fights. Like, I wouldn't say his fights are boring, but they're not the most exciting fights. RDA explains why he took the foot off the gas against Renato Moicano. Says lack of throwing towel in MMA drives me nuts. So this is something that we spoke about before, right? Obviously, the Renato Moicano versus RDA co-main event of this past weekend at UFC 272. Let's take a look at what RDA said in reference to the fight not being stopped. RDA says, I was surprised the fight wasn't stopped. I told my corner after the doctor stepped in from the 3rd to the 4th to the 5th. They didn't stop in the 3rd, and I said they're going to stop it for sure, but they didn't. My coaches told me, just walk around. eat some time. Don't need to take any risks right now. He's probably going to try to do some crazy stuff right now. You're winning the fight already. Don't take any risks. So this is what he says about whether he took it easy on him in the 5th round or whether he gassed out, which we were debating before. I'm not going to say I took it easy on him in the 5th. I went, but I took my foot off the gas because I knew, But I took my foot off the gas because I knew I was 4 rounds ahead and he's a hard guy to finish. So my coach said, don't take any risks. Just go there, eat some time, walk around. But that's when I got caught. I think by taking my foot off the gas, he kind of recovered a little bit and felt more confident. That's why he came forward and threw those shots. There's our answer. There we go. Don't you love it when you have a question and it's answered? And like there's physical evidence of the question being answered? Because that just happened. So I think that deserves a round of applause. Thank you, RDA. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Ex-UFC champion Cain Velasquez denied bail in attempted murder case. Judge condemns reckless actions. So obviously, we had Cain Velasquez's recent hearing in San Jose, and the judge denied Cain Velasquez's bail, says that he's too much of a risk to everyone around him. Judge Shalana Brown heard arguments from both Velasquez's attorney Mark Garagos as well as Deputy District Attorney Aaron French before issuing her final ruling, where she says, not her final ruling, her ruling, where she says, it is clear to this court that there is no clear and convincing evidence that there is a substantial likelihood that release would result in great bodily injury, not just to the named complaining witnesses in the case, but to Santa Clara residents at large. What? This case involves allegations of extreme recklessness to human life. Tell me something then, Judge. Tell me this. So the guy who's molesting little girls, he's getting to walk around, roam free. He's not a hazard. He's not a nuisance. He's not a threat. He's not a danger to anybody else. None of these San Jose residents at large. But Cain is a threat to all these San Jose residents. Cain for protecting his daughter, for doing what already the president of his fucking company came out and said that he would do himself, that many people have said. I'm with you, Cain. I don't care if people disagree with me or not. Free Cain, dude. He did the right thing. That's his daughter. Ukraine's Mariana Moroz says she cried every day before UFC 272, pleads for return to normal life. It's tough, man, what's going on out there in Ukraine. If you're from Ukraine, if you're watching from that part of the world, all the best with you. You're in our prayers, obviously. Mariana Moroz, man, what a fight that she put on, man. Like, that was a great... Women mixed martial arts is getting better, and better. It is very much comparable to men's mixed martial arts, very much as entertaining. And again, to see those two women on the ground do what they did at a very high level, those exchanges is super high level. We had a little bit of a rivalry there, a little bit of an in-gym rivalry there, a beef, sort of shades of Masvidal Covington on a much smaller scale. But it was interesting. It was cool to see that on the prelims. Again, that fight probably could have been on the main card over Hardy versus Spivak too. Just saying. Kevin Holland critical of UFC 272 performance. Wants 6 bouts in 2022 at both 170 and 185. Again, I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world if he chose to fight at 185, because I'll say it, like we said earlier, I think you have to credit the opponent selection on the UFC's end as much as the drop to 170 for his victory. You have to credit both of those things, because he didn't have a good array of opponents. It wasn't a good matchup. They weren't good matchups for him before this. So, give the UFC credit in that regard. Gunnar Nelson now expected to face Takashi Sato at UFC London card. UFC London is fucking stacked, people. That is going to be a fun one to cover. And I do think it's in 2 weeks, right? So it's not after this one, it's the next one. We got a lot of fun fights, man. Dustin Poirier, big undercard to Colby Covington, but now favorite over Nate Diaz in future odds. Yeah. I mean, Colby versus Dustin makes sense, man. Dustin, think about it. Dustin's pretty much out of the title picture in the short term and almost long term at 55, if you think about it. I mean, there's people that'll debate, if he wins 1 or 2 fights at 55, he could be back in the title picture. And I would agree with that. If he wins like 2 fights, he could certainly be back in there. But to keep making that weight cut, man, to keep fighting those dogs, like, it almost seems right to go up to 70, to take big money fights and not have to cut that weight, So Dustin versus Nate would make a lot of sense. That makes all the sense in the world. But I think Dustin Colby makes sense too. That's another rivalry. It's not as big a rivalry as Masvidal versus Covington. It doesn't have that rich backstory and evidence as the Masvidal versus Covington one, right? But in the octagon, I think it'd probably be a better fight. I think it would. Because when it goes to the ground, there's at least some threat of a submission from Dustin Poirier. You're not really going to have any threat of a submission from Masvidal. Masvidal is just looking to get back up every time he goes down. And so is Dustin, against a guy like Covington, I would think, but not a good matchup. Cynthia Calvillo returning to strawweight to welcome back Brianna Fortino at UFC event on June 4th. Interesting. Michael Bisping says Conor McGregor could KO Charles Oliveira to reclaim UFC title. He's still got that left hand. Yeah, Mike said this on the Joe Rogan Experience. He says, it's wild, but if you ran the company, would you want that to happen? They're talking about Conor getting the next title shot, right? It's ridiculous for Conor to get the next title shot. Now, I was reading on Twitter this morning, and, I think I would have to agree with this, whoever said this. I saw something where it says that the reason that Dana White is saying that Islam Makhachev has to fight Beneil Dariush, that Islam's not ready to get the title shot next, is so that Conor could step in and fight Oliveira after Gaethje. And I could see that, man. Like, that does make a lot of sense to me. That checks out, because it's not, if Dana White keeps Islam busy, there's not going to be an uproar about, Islam should be next over Conor. Then you don't have to pick between one or the other. Again, if you want to draw pay-per-views, if you want to make some money, the sad truth is, yes, Conor McGregor versus Charles Oliveira is probably the fight you would want to make more money. But again, man, it doesn't make sense. You have to, for the sport to keep its, I'm forgetting the word here, but for the sport to keep its serious, like for the sport to keep its credibility, there we go. Big words. Credibility. That's a big word right there. For the sport to keep its credibility, man, like you can't jump people. You know what I mean? You can't do that. It sends a wrong message. It fucks with the infrastructure of the sport. Another big word. I'm joking. But no, seriously though, Conor McGregor, man, you can't just jump people in line because you're Conor McGregor. It doesn't work that way. And it's funny because Conor's saying things along the lines of yeah, I'm fighting Charles next. Deal with it. The simple fact that Conor's even saying deal with it, that sounds like he even knows he doesn't deserve it, Islam Makhachev should be fighting next for the title, man. I've been saying this every single episode because it's just so glaring. It's glaringly fucking obvious. The guy's on a 10-fight win streak. Do you understand? He's on a 10-fight win streak in the UFC. Give him the next title shot, for Christ's sake. It does not make any sense. Tim Elliott for sure illegally grabbed Tagir Ulanbekov's glove at UFC 272. Logan Paul discusses his brother Jake's feud with Dana White. Wants to see him box Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. We all know that's not happening. Joe Rogan, Colby Covington declares support for Cain Velasquez. You could only imagine the rage. UFC 272 takeaways. Colby Covington versus Jorge Mazvido was beginning of the end to a welterweight era. Renato Moicano issues statement following brutal UFC 272 loss. Let's check out what Renato Moicano had to say after his fight. No excuses. Thanks Rafael dos Anjos and the UFC for this opportunity. This defeat doesn't define me. I'm not a loser because I lost, and I'm not a winner when I win. I'm victorious in life the way I handle myself with my family and my team. Thank you, God. This is a great time to be alive. Never forget, I'm always chasing the big money. So that's going to do it for this week's episode number 9 of Talkin MMA. We are picking up some momentum, so follow us on all platforms. We're on Twitter. We're on TikTok. We're on Instagram. If you're not listening on YouTube, you could also listen on Spotify, Anchor FM. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe while you're here. Thank you so much. Tune in next time.